Hello, everybody out there, whoever you are, wherever you are. This is another episode of Discussions with David, which comes to you somewhat randomly, but most weekdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Although today we're broadcasting an hour late. I had a dentist appointment this morning. My mouth is now full of actually quite a bit more gold than it was than had in it yesterday. Um, and let's see. So this discussions with David you can find in archived form, live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you're watching on any of those platforms, if you want to take a moment to share this broadcast, feel free. And we'll be live for the next hour here on these platforms. And then it's all archived afterwards in the Discussions with David playlist on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/dvovics, or you can find the interviews along with other content that I put out there, concerts and various other things, in the podcast This Week with David Rovics. If you look on any podcasting platform for This Week with David Rovics, or go to davidrovics.com, you can get the David Rovics mobile app, all kinds of exciting possible ways you can hear me and my guests. And today's guest is the executive director of People's Music Network, which is an organization that I've been involved with in one way or another since actually even long before I met Ben Grosscup, the executive director of PMN, which was a long time ago when I met Ben, which was actually the late '90s. But I think it was at the beginning of the '90s when I first started attending People's Music Network gatherings, and I'm very happy to have Ben. Ben is not just the executive director of PMN, but he's also a fine musician and songwriter, and resident of Massachusetts, among other things, and originally from another state beginning with an M, but they're in North Minnesota, which is of course in the news more than most states lately, and this week in particular, once again. But there's we can go down that rabbit hole and never come out if we start talking about 2020. But let's just talk about popular education and People's Music Network, or a little bit about the Well, we're going to get into the pandemic inevitably. You can't talk about anything without talking about the pandemic. No. But can we talk about first, like what is? I mean, we could go. I want to ask you a lot of questions, Ben. But first of all, with that sign behind you, and this is the prominent thing people are going to wonder first when they see this, what is the People's Music Network?
Well, like you said, you got involved with it before I did, David, but I got involved in 2005. And the whole thing started back in the late 70s as this network of artists who came together to support one another in the development of this music as a tool for social change. And I think that it kind of grew into a bit of a tribe in some ways. People needed to find that support from one another. And one of the concrete ways in which people have, I think, found us over the years is as a place that has a gathering twice a year, and so of course we have this long tradition of in-person gatherings, winter gatherings, summer gatherings, and then the big it's been about a year now since we pretty much shifted on a dime and turned from doing all of our events in person to doing them online. And so that's been a huge change, and has a lot of positives, because there's a lot more members now. There's a lot more people who are involved on a regular basis, and of course, we don't have to explain too much about what we're missing out on, but it's significant, with the kind of, I think, the music we do, David. It's stuff that feeds people's hearts. It's meaningful on a political level, but it's meaningful on another level too. It's like how we get along in life. I mean, I just remember when I was a teenager and I discovered your music. It was amazing. I was like a volunteer member of this anarchist pirate radio collective, and there was some copies of your CD in the studio, and it just set me on a path, and like, I think the music you do, and I think the music that a lot of people these days do, it's meaningful on a lot of levels. It's political inspiration, but it's also like how we get along, with living through a difficult situation. It's been a difficult situation, and we've been getting along pretty well in it with having a space for regular, people coming together to share their craft, and what message their craft holds.
I mean, what you're speaking to basically is like all the sort of meaning that music has in a society and the roles that it plays. But like for people that might be, I mean, I never know who are necessarily watching these broadcasts, but definitely, I mean, I can say for sure that there's quite a few teenagers who are getting turned on to radical politics through broadcasts like this on YouTube and other platforms. I mean, judging from if you can believe your own comments, that's definitely a significant part of the audience, and so for people that I mean, just for anybody out there that might be looking for a definition, how would you define people's music? I know it's a very really I don't want to get into the worms of all the I mean we can get into the worms, but but just really broadly, like what do we mean by people's music as opposed to what they might think of as mainstream or popular music or whatever we're calling it. I guess popular is a very broad term that goes way back and covers a lot of different genres. But is people's music something you hear on the radio or not, or what is that?
Oh, well, I think that one way to answer that question is historically, and looking at the actual full name of the organization, the People's Music Network for Songs of Freedom and Struggle. So, Songs of Freedom and Struggle was kind of the first iteration of the name, and then that was a retreat that happened in this rural place, and then there was this idea of the People's Music Network. And I think historically, when that term was used in the early 80s, I think that they meant like the people as like the people who are fighting for social change, like in the Marxist sense of it, like kind of the historical subject, the people, right? And the historical subject in the sense of like who moves a historical project forward, right? It's the people, and that the people need music to go with their struggle. So I think that's where the concept of it came. But I think that it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people too. I mean, but I think it's people's music is music that is moving people's consciousness forward. It's not corporate music. It's not the kind of music that sort of like makes you habituated to the the life of capitalism and racism and sexism. It's like it's music that is about inspiring consciousness. It's about moving toward a better place in our world.
And I think in terms of using music as a tool for popular education, you are a magnificent example of a songwriter that is doing just that, along with many other people who are involved with PMN, either intensely or peripherally, or just who should be involved, at least in terms of the kind of work they're doing. But uh, I think, and it's not called Socialism 101. It has a different title. But would you do the Socialism 101 song for us?
I'd
I
be
know
happy to.
you're actually set up with a decent microphone, which is not the case with many people I interview. So we know in advance that you're actually capable of sounding good. So that's note to
Yeah,
our guests.
no
Any
doubt.
guests who are about to flee, oh no, he's going to play the guitar. Don't worry, stick around. It's going to
Don't worry
sound
about
good.
it. It should be fine.
We'll be all
Yeah.
right.
Well, I'll tell you. I think I was at the Great Labor Arts Exchange one year. I think it was the last year before the pandemic. Actually, wonderful event that our friends in Washington D.C. organized, and and the late night bar scene where everybody's drinking, and they were all singing this song written by George Folk or George Folk, who the song was recorded by John Fromer family, and that melody was just in my head, And I think I came back from Washington D.C. up to Western Massachusetts where I live, and I was just ruminating on how irrational it is to have everybody in their own private cars. You know, it's just so stupid that our society works that way. Like, why don't we just figure out what the need is to have a rational society, and then we arrange things around that. So that was sort of how I was like had that melody in my head. And I was thinking about socialism, and this is what came out. So here goes. We are 7 billion people. We all have hopes and dreams. Most of us live under a capitalist regime where some can make a killing and others just get killed. We don't have to live like this. There's an alternative to build. Let's build a socialist system. Make the dream come alive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. Let's socialize the profits to help the people thrive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. 7 billion people, how can we all succeed? Not by competition for the basic things we need. Not by exploitation of our dwindling natural wealth. We need a system that promotes cooperation and health. Let's build a socialist system. Make the dream come alive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. Let's socialize the profits to help the people thrive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. Socialism means institutions based on care for everybody living and for the planet that we share. Confronting every oppression in the places where they live. Ensuring justice in the ways that people take and people give. The dream of socialism is rooted in the heart, and taking political power is an essential part. The rich will surely fight to maintain the wealth they stole. So we need organization to reach the socialist goal. Let's build a socialist system. Make the dream come alive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. Let's socialize the profits to help the people thrive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive. We need a socialist system for the people to survive.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's like I mean that it is that's such sort of direct form of popular education that it's sort of like the kind of thing that a lot of us might shy away from, but then you just like took it on directly, and I think it made it work so well. And I wonder, did you, when just as a songwriter, like when you were thinking about writing it, a song that is actually just communicating so directly, did you think, oh wait, maybe I should come up with a metaphor, or maybe you know, people accuse me of not using enough metaphors. I don't know about you.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think, I guess I'm probably a very literal-minded person. I mean, if, to the extent I have any self-awareness about this kind of thing. I mean, it's like, I think for me, the songwriting thing, it meanders between the type of language you use for songwriting and the type of language you use for political rhetoric, right? there's rules of debate. If you're going to debate with somebody about a issue, you adhere to certain, you respect people's intelligence, you respect them as human beings, and you fight about what's to be fought about. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of beautiful songs that are much more metaphorically based, and I just not so good at writing those. But I don't know, this other type of straight ahead communication. Maybe I like it because it to me might be a similar argument I might make if we were having a discussion, just over coffee.
I think it's one of the hallmarks of maybe the trying the most people who are maybe effectively doing this kind of communication through the arts and through music and through other forms of the arts, I think are probably. I mean, I guess I would put you and I and many others, you could say, in the Pete Seeger school of thought in terms of like, don't use don't use four syllable words. If it's a Latin word, you probably don't need to use it. Basically, you know, I mean, that may be a slight exaggeration of his perspective, but I mean, I think one of the first things he ever said to me was like when I used the word proletariat in a sentence or something along the lines like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, I mean, I was a teenager, I think, but it was very, one of those. I mean, of course, when you meet somebody like that, anything they say is going to have an impact on you, right? So,
Now, see,
but
you just touched on a really important thing there, David, about your when you first met Pete Seeger. You met him at People's Music Network, right?
People's Music Network, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
no, did I? No, I think actually I met him. Oh gosh, I don't
Well, maybe you
remember
met him
where.
at
But anyway, a lot of people met
somewhere.
him there. He was very, very accessible, easily accessible. Anybody who went to the Sloop Club or
Yeah.
People's Music Network could meet Pete Seeger. He was not a hard person to meet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess regardless of where you met him, it's like Pete was of course, for folks who don't know, a co-founder of the People's Music Network, and I think one of the things that he did, and when I look at my own life, David, and I think about your role in it, it really comes full circle. I'm almost 40. I live in Western Massachusetts. I started listening to you 22 years ago. You know, um, so Pete had a big influence culturally within PMN in that he valued this idea of mentorship, like that he gave you that. So like when you were like trying to write a song with the word proletariat in it, and it just however you came up with that the first time around, it just didn't quite work. But he saw that you were a sincere person and you were trying. And you know what? Before I met you, David, in the late 90s. I got involved with People's Music Network in 2005. So before I even got involved with this outfit, I had met you, and you gave me guitar lessons, and, because I was writing these kind of, you might call them mediocre songs. I mean, I mean, let's just call it artistically. I should really take that back. I said mediocre, but the thing is that I was a sincere person too when I was younger. Like,
Hmm.
so to call that mediocre is sort of a little bit wrong. I mean, I'm
Well,
a little
I mean, I guess.
ungenerous with myself even by saying that. Actually, I feel a little gross. Yeah.
Yeah, well, mediocre. Maybe I mean maybe that's too judgmental a term, but you could definitely
Yes.
hear the I guess you could say maturation of your songwriter or whatever positive term we want to. But I mean, definitely your earlier stuff, as with most people's earlier stuff, was. I mean, now I'd have to listen to it to remember, but I remember the songs that were on that CD from like the late '90s, and
Yeah.
it was just you. It's easier to fall into different kinds of songwriting cliches, to use rhymes that you
Yes.
shouldn't use and all that kind of stuff. Just the kind of stuff that you, after you do enough songwriting, you just tend to avoid, right? I mean, there's all these little pitfalls that until you've done it enough or listened to enough other material, then it's just too easy in whatever art form, whether you're talking about songwriting or novel writing or journalism. Like if you're
Yeah.
young, you're probably not going to be as good at it as when you get older. With a lot of really notable exceptions. I guess.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I just think that part of it, how, how you can evolve, like how a person gets from that sincere but very inexperienced place to a more experienced place. A lot of it is like having a community that welcomes
Right.
you and doesn't call you mediocre, but actually sees the brilliance of what is in there,
The
you know.
mentoring kind of community
Yeah.
that you get out of a place like PM, out of a gathering like the People's Music Network annual winter and summer gatherings, to mention a couple of places where one might really get that kind of experience especially as like a young songwriter. For yeah,
So to me, it's not about saying the level of the craft important or something, or that we've all mastered it equally. It's that we all have something important to say, and all of us have a voice that it matters equally. And when we create an organization that is based on that principle, then a whole bunch of interesting things can happen artistically and politically. I think because you start building trust in that kind of context, and that's to me what the People's Music Network is about.
and talk more about what the People's Music Network has done as a sort of fostering that kind of culture, and what kinds of directions that you might be hope. Or I mean, it's a too big a question. Let's break this down into multiple questions. Can we talk about like the role of music as popular education, and what People's Music Network has tried to do to try to get that out there? I mean, that's a big question. There's a lot of different uh, directions to go in there, but what is this? What is the particular? I guess where I'm getting at there is what is the particular potency of music as a tool of communication?
Well, I sort of have to answer a question like that a lot in terms of my own approach as an artist. I mean, I could say what I think the People's Music Network stands for with regard to how do we use music. But the thing is that our members use music in a variety of ways. Some of them are looking at it as like popular education to build a revolutionary movement. Some people are looking at music as a tool for getting a chorus together. How do I build community? What kind, or oh, what about healing songs? Songs that are gonna like heal people's emotions and so forth.
Yeah,
So
what
there's
about
like,
that, Ben? Let's just stop there for a moment, because that is, I mean, because how much do you have to deal with in your role as executive director of PMN, or just as an artist, or just as an activist? I mean, that particular question of parameters, like so when is it? I mean, it's a very sticky question, and I'm not
oh
expecting any
yeah,
kind of
no,
clear
great
answer,
question.
but like when is it sort of political? When is it people's music, and when is it like I mean, and you talked about taking care of people's emotions, and the importance of that, and but of course there's a lot of other groups that are more focused on that sort of thing, and not focused on sort of what we might call the more political end of things. And
Well, right,
what
yeah.
about that?
I mean, for that sort of like cohort of people that have been really involved with People's Music Network over the years, this becomes like the really big question, because people come into that space expecting a certain kind of reflection back to them of their own values, and like some of us are, it's a small group of us in a way who really are carrying on some of these more kind of radical left wing political traditions through the music. And so I kind of understand that, people come in with a certain set of expectations, and then sometimes, but in fact our communities are deeply heterogeneous. Like people are coming from a variety of places. I mean, I look at it as we want to lift up a lot of approaches, as an organization. So when we figure out parameters, part of figuring out parameters is not so much saying like this is the kind of music that is defined as people's music and this is the kind that isn't, because even I mean, I don't know. We made like this distinction earlier in the conversation about like corporate music or like music you hear on the radio, which is like generally quite bad, right? In my opinion, but like politically, artistically, I don't like it. But that being said, if you fixate too much on the sort of harsh distinction, you're going to find that that quickly falls apart. So I think that the way we make parameters is by supporting the leadership of people who feel a real desire and need to be in community with other artists. When we do that, then the topics just fall into place. I mean, we got this amazing event that we're doing on a regular basis now. We're actually going to be doing it on the 21st at Songs of the Spirit. You know, it's not live streamed. It's just for the people who are there, and it's like, it's awesome. I mean, we're taking this tradition that has happened in person for all these years, and then we're translating into this Zoom setting, which the thing about it, it's like, I feel that, I don't know, very active with live streaming as you are, but I find it very difficult to occupy any kind of live streamed situation, really feel like I'm in a sacred space. But even when I'm on Zoom with the Songs of the Spirit, I feel like I'm there, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of working with the people who in our organization who feel most passionate about that. But also, you know, we've had other kinds of topics. I mean, just to highlight one example, I don't know, one that you were involved with, like Hiroshima Day or something, remembering the crimes of the United States government dropping the atomic bombs. We had a whole bunch of artists, yourself included, that were included for a very specific purpose, you know, to memorialize the violence that our country has inflicted on the world. So just, you know, we've had lots of examples like that. So the People's Music Network we're drawing upon the creative resources of the membership and seeing that as a real resource to build on.
Can we, for people that may not have been at the virtual gathering or any of the physical gatherings, of course, the physical gatherings, you know, I guess this is becoming such a common topic that people are already very familiar with the advantages of online communication. That, you know, geographical boundaries have largely fallen apart for a lot of people, and this physical, so the virtual gathering. I mean, I know you've mentioned to me that PMN's membership has multiplied by 5 times. Since the pandemic hit, and I think you said something along those lines.
Well, close
It's
to
grown a
three.
lot. Three
Close to
times.
three
Okay, it's
times.
grown a
Yeah.
lot, and I'd think a big part of that is probably because the physical gatherings that have been happening twice a year since a long time ago now, are pretty much almost always in the Northeast somewhere, and so northeastern United States, and so that sort of limits the geographic interest in this particular organization. And I know I'm kind of fixating on it, but it's just, I think, it's also just a way to talk about music and popular education too. And I think it's an important thing that, you know, exist and that you're doing. And I wonder if we can, at the risk of boring anybody that's actually been to a PMN gathering, can we talk about what goes on at the gathering? So it's, for me, like the mix of different things that happens in terms, like we were talking about mentorship before, but also the song swaps and just people gathering in one place for several days, you know, sort of off, you know, the summer gatherings, especially when you're actually sort of camping or living, you know, together in the same environment, eating together and everything. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of the whole thing that I think is really special and notable. But can we just talk about some of the different aspects of what goes on and
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
why it happens, why it
I mean,
happens, and why it's cool?
you know, I think that the you know, what I was just thinking of is sort of like, if you look at like each of the traditions from the weekend, right, and like how many of them translated over to the online format, and then how many of them did we have to sort of leave behind?
Oh, that's very
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
you know, like, so one of the ideas I think of our gatherings that is probably most paradigmatic form of a PMN event is the round robin, right? This is the kind of concept that everybody gets a voice. everybody gets their 5 minutes, and that the community is like part of the agreement. I mean, it's not like a written down agreement, but I sort of interpret it this way. Like there's a little bit of a deal you make, it's like you get the best audience ever, the most enthusiastic, loving audience ever. And, you will then also be part of that audience to be a fantastic audience for other people. There's a little bit of a wager there, and that wager doesn't work for everybody. But I used the wrong word. Agreement was the word I was looking for. Um, but but I think that this idea translates well to Zoom. And then songs of the spirit. You don't get.
Because if people aren't paying attention, nobody knows, right? I mean, because on Zoom, you just kind of, it's easy to feel like nobody's paying attention when you're alone playing in your living room, even if you might theoretically have an audience of 200 people out there, right? I mean, you still feel
Right. You still feel alone.
it's still easy to feel alone. You may have managed to not feel alone somehow, but the medium doesn't necessarily lend itself to feeling like you're surrounded by 200 people, because you're not, right? But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and you can. I mean, and so we can kind of get a facsimile of a feeling of a lot of energy by, I don't know, little things like using the chat, or like people
Mm,
leaving their cameras on and clapping like that or whatever,
yeah.
with their hands waving. Um, so I mean, it's just so funny, because it's like for the last year we've been sort of like repeating these cliches about, oh, the wonders of connecting with everybody all over the world, and meanwhile I'm thinking, like, what about the actual places, the local places, the venues that like came, were an integral part of another way of life, um
The
all,
physical venues you're talking about, like all the ones that are
all
closing all around the world,
yeah,
or
yeah. I mean, it's like I I'm just I'm just sometimes I am just needing to like sit back and like take in the destruction that I think is unfolding, right? And it's not just, I mean, of course it's people's lives. I mean, that on the most obvious level, but it's like a whole system, you know, um crumbling, and but like people's lives are like attached to that system. So like, um i I really wonder about, the big term, the long term implications, um for,
hell yeah.
for the community that sustains us, not just
No, absolutely.
not just for one cool thing that we can do on Zoom. I mean, we're going to keep doing the cool stuff, but like, it just, we need to like put that excitement and everything into that broader context, because again, like one of the first things I said in this conversation with you, David, it's like it goes back to what is going to feed people's souls. We have some ways of using the technologies that's available to us right now to make a little bit of a better situation out of a really difficult one, but still, people need these other in-person venues. I mean, we're starting to talk right now, within the People's Music Network, how would we move back to in-person? um, are we going to be ready for that? Meanwhile, I'm very pessimistic about just the how fast we can actually keep up with the virus, especially given the for-profit health insurance system we have and everything, as a country. So
Yeah, when it
so
comes to
I
trying to make plans as an organization, I mean, or as an individual, I don't know any artists who are planning tours. Do you?
no, no, I don't. So I like, I'm not the biggest proponent of the idea of hope. I'm more interested in truth than hope. But I understand why people want to feel hopeful, and want to think, in hopeful terms, or how there can even be an obstinate kind of hope that people sort of hold up as a mode of resistance against, the defeatism, or the sort of resignation, to that kind of hope I can kind of get on board with. But I think when
Hope in the idea of hope. Yeah, right? Is that kind of, does that sum it up? I totally believe in that kind of hope. Yeah, like not hope in the Democratic Party to save us. Not that kind of hope, but hope in the possibility of something hopeful
yes,
happening.
that something could unfold, right? And that
Yeah,
and that and and that we have a role in like in bringing that something about. I feel
right,
that way for sure.
right. And I mean, some of what you're talking about there is, I mean, it's touching on also the sort of, I mean, when we're talking about what's been happening in the past year and all the venues closing, and 65% of artists being fully unemployed, like of the artists who used to be employed. But even that statistic of 65% of artists being fully unemployed is such a kind of meaningless statistic because it doesn't really take into account the fact that the all these industries we're talking about, like outside, other than television, like every other industry in terms of the arts, and I know this isn't necessarily what PMN is about as an organization, but just moving on to a related but different subject. I mean, the arts outside of television are in a state of collapse for the past 20, 30 years, right? And in terms of the music industry, which is the one I'm most familiar with, the music industry, whether you're talking about independent art labels or the big labels, is about 20% the size of what it was 20 years ago, which means like between 1997 and 2017 the music industry collapsed to 20% of the size of what it had been. And so in terms of like, so this is reflected in terms of like venues and CD sales and I mean in so many ways. So when we're talking about an industry that was already in a state of collapse before the pandemic collapsed it much further, right? So I mean, just putting these things into context for people that have not been following what it's like to attempt to be an artist. But of course, I mean, you've been in, it kind of comes back in a way what I know I'm saying a lot of stuff here, but and it's not all going to turn into a question necessarily, but it kind of comes back to the your particular your job. I mean, I know it's not a lucrative job. It's probably a part-time job, a full-time part-time job, I imagine, like so many of these kinds of jobs when we're talking about the nonprofit sector of being the executive director of PMN. But you're not a touring performer. You're not a full-time touring performer, and that might be related to the collapse of the music industry. If you had CDs to sell, nobody would buy them. Nobody buys anybody's CDs. So you know what I'm saying, right? When you started out as a singer-songwriter, that was just at the beginning of the collapse of the music industry.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, and I think that has totally shaped me as a person. I mean, I just think of like some of the forces in society that shaped some of my elders, some of my mentors. I mean, yourself, who I include in that category. And no offense about the elder thing.
I'm 13 years older, so I'll take it. It's all right. I can do the math. It's not quite a generation, but it's half a generation. When we were young, it seemed significant.
I know. Right. Because of course I was a teenager, right? Yeah, but the forces that shape people. I mean, as an artist, like on a psychological level, this idea that like, oh my gosh, I could be loved and recognized, and then paid for this work, like having moments in your career that sort of confirm that this is possible. When you have a moment like that, can be that can kind of change your ideas about things. I mean, I think I've had a few moments like that as a performer, but like basically never went full throttle with it. And then the other force that was like really working on me and my own development in terms of thinking about my role was like having this sort of smaller community again. I like your metaphor, David, about like the collapse of the music industry and like what grows up in the interstices between the chunks of rubble that have been left by this collapse, right?
Very good.
Well,
Yes.
PMN is one of those things. I mean, it's like we grew up in the middle of this little thing that's collapsing. Um, even I mean, I've heard you interview Charlie King on your show, and I remember I think you might have even brought it up in the interview with him. Um, he's one of the people who certainly, one of my elders and one of my mentors, and someone I still work with in People's Music Network.
Hmm.
He talks about how even when PMN began in 1977, at some level, they felt back then that there had been a collapse of the 60s music scene. And that
Oh
the
yeah,
reason they started in 1977, which seems like a life billion years ago, was because they wanted to they wanted to build something up again in
yeah,
the rubble of the collapse.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's very good. And do you have any thoughts in particular? Speaking of the rubble of the collapse, I mean, it just seems to just kind of, it speaks to the present moment. Like in the rubble of this particular collapse we're in. Of course, I mean, talking about the collapse and everything. I mean, the future. It's so hard to talk about because not only do we not know the future of the pandemic, but I think anybody that really thinks they fully understand the economic implications of this $1.9 trillion package. I mean, I think you're probably. Yeah, I mean, it's of course right for the left to be criticizing it and saying we need a $15 minimum wage. Of course we do, and that's all correct. But this this is a lot of money that they're throwing at this problem, and it's going to have an impact. And it's not going to. I think the total economic collapse is not around the corner with not for a couple of years, not with that kind of money floating around in the economy. But I mean, it just seems to me like the predictions of everything falling apart are maybe a bit exaggerated, but in any case, we are still, for sure, the venues are closed. The artists are generally unemployed, even if they are collecting unemployment money that may be as much or more than what they were making the year before, like in my case. But but this what might come out of the collapse of this new collapse in terms of the arts scene? Do you think? Do you have any? Or is it just like nobody can really predict the future? Are you even thinking about such things?
well, uh, I wish I had that big of a vision of like the way the arts is going.
I don't.
I think
That's why I'm asking.
I think all the time on like what's happening to my own consciousness, what's happening to the consciousness of my comrades, my elders, my mentors, and also some of the younger people who are coming up. Well, one of the things I see, and this again is sort of at a micro level, but isn't it just sort of weird how you subject people to like this year so far or so of isolation, and and things are a little complicated to learn technically, like lots of people are learning them, you know so I mean, I just think I can imagine like 2 years ago having a conversation about, I don't know, Zoom or something, and it just would have seemed kind of a waste of time to like spend all that time learning that stuff, you know.
Yep.
And now, you know it's not like but now it just doesn't. It seems like I mean, for myself, I feel like I've got a lot of patience to slog through things that are frustrating and all kinds of things, but it's changed my consciousness, and but what is that going to mean going forward? I mean, people aren't going to forget some of the positive things they experienced around this this live streaming era, you know. um, they're gonna remember that. If the vaccine is effective enough is what we hope, and that the variants don't like speed up past the vaccine, which is what we hope. But um, if if that kind of thing can happen, we can start meeting in person again. All the same economic things that make it difficult for people to travel are going to be worse than before, and they were pretty difficult before. Um, so so people are gonna have to come up with new models for how to have community, I think. Um,
Hmm. And what about, like, I mean, in the past year, another thing that a lot of us have had to be more immersed in than we were before is what they call social media. And I heard somebody call it anti-social media, and I like that term
yeah.
much better. But I think in the past year, people are getting even more of their information and misinformation from anti-social media rather than from their surroundings, since they're often, more and more isolated if they're not, working in a slaughterhouse or delivering packages. You know, what I mean, one of the things that is, I think, particularly notable about you as an individual and as an activist, Ben, is that you're 40 years old and you're of the generation that basically largely grew up online. But you've largely avoided the corporate anti-social media platforms, much more than many other people manage not to get sucked into them, which I would paint as an entirely positive thing at this point. Although, of course, there's reasons to, be on the platform, as you have, obviously, for anybody that's following your work with PMN. Obviously, you've bitten the bullet and you're very much on these platforms. But can you talk
Yeah.
about that a bit?
Well, I mean, I think I tend to frame, maybe I have a song for you if you'd be interested, but
Yeah, absolutely.
but
I
on the
was going to
level
get you to sing. I
of
love your
practice.
version of "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" too. I was
Oh,
going to
oh,
get
good.
you to
Okay.
close us out with that. But if you got another
There's a
song, man,
little
do
bit of
that
a
too.
tie-in between that song and this question, though.
Yes,
And
please.
and and I think that on the level of like social media, like as part of your life, to me, yeah, it's a practical question. It's like, how do you get the word out about things, and that's you know in capitalism, when you answer yourself a practical question like, how am I going to get the word out about something, guess what, you are reproducing capitalism, right? You are, you know the you are reproducing the relations of power that exist,
You're marketing a product, right?
yes. And there's all this stuff about, how a social media structure gets us to think in less collective terms. It gets us to think in terms of personal brands and so forth, and that's just, I think that's very limiting on the human soul. When I think about, like, uh we're a tiny little Facebook page, really, the People's Music Network, but it's grown a little bit. But we're not promoting through that, some personality. It's like we're promoting the idea of having a membership organization that's committed to using music, for a social justice, peace kind of political purpose, and so when members are doing that kind of thing, we promote what they're doing. And when we're doing an event where people are sharing songs, we're going to do something on March 19th where members are just going to get together and do a song swap. We'll live stream it. And, these have gotten a little popular. So we're trying to, have a fair way of kind of like divvying up the time and everything, just like anywhere else would have to figure out. Um, but that's at some level, that's just a practical question, in the same way that, like, I don't know, but when the automobile was first invented, it was like, well, how am I going to get around? Well, they're tearing up they're tearing up the train tracks in my city. They had this incredible train track system in a lot of American cities, and they tore those up at the suggestion of the automobile lobby. So then, what
Mm.
do? You need to get to work. So you answer yourself a practical question, and yeah, it has implications when you scale up. But I mean, and one of those big implications that we're dealing with now is all the power that the social media companies have, and there really is, I think, this tremendous turn toward censorship, and ideas that do not fit with the corporate state, the official sanctioned neoliberal ideology that speaks in all these different ways. Yeah, that becomes, we've set up a system that has given these social media corporations a tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of power. And there's always, going to be a threat that they're going to be able to say, well, it's a good thing that somebody has all this power because, and we're the responsible ones and everything. But I do not think so. So that doesn't lead to simple answers as to what is to be done. But I do think that whenever we're engaging in practical questions like how to get the word out, we need to do so with a certain kind of awareness about the bigger picture of how this system is using these tools to amass power and wealth in the hands of the very, very few.
Very well said. And yes, do you have your guitar handy? Can you do what you do? I don't know. Did you have a different song in mind? Or
I did want to do "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" actually, so I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Oh, excellent! Because I think also, especially after Biden's election, I think this speaks to so many people who have. And I was just hearing it on NPR on an NPR show. Basically, people were saying like, "How do you feel about Biden getting elected?" And there were people. Most of the people who answered, of course, this is NPR, so the listenership is pretty liberal generally, and most of the listeners who called in were saying, basically, I'm so glad Biden got elected so I can go back to sleep. I mean, really, they might as well have just phrased it like that.
Oh yeah, like when Biden bombed the
yes.
targets in Syria, and the tweet came out like, "Oh, it's great to have a normal president again," or something.
Right.
From some liberal commentator. Well, actually, David, you are the first one to hear the some of the slightly revised lyrics. See, I got to tell you, this has been a project of revising the words of "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" for me, like since I was 18 years old.
Each new liberal president that comes along.
I think starting in 2016, there's some YouTubes of me singing earlier versions of this starting in 2016. I think by 2016 I started to have something worth singing, I think, but then I keep thinking about it more. And events continue to unfold is the other thing. So as events unfold and as my ideas unfold, I do tweak the lyrics a little bit.
Cool. So folk process.
Yeah, so of course this original song was written in 1965. Phil Oakes sang it at the demonstration of the Students for a Democratic Society, and this is my effort to keep this song, which has always been controversial on the left, current. So here it goes. I mourned the Tiananmen martyrs, whose protests were brutally quelled. And I cheered when Mandela walked freely after so many years in a cell. But Mr. Assange can rot in prison. Those secrets were not his to tell. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Heard a little bit of static right there. Thanks. I attend diversity trainings, and I leave feeling so reassured. I love Oprah and Magic and Foreman. It's great to see blacks become entrepreneurs. But don't go and form a new party. That's not the way to be heard. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. I cheered when Obama was chosen, my faith in the system restored. And I'll never forgive Ralph Nader for the election he stole from Al Gore. And my neighborhood welcomes all races of people with high credit scores. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Here's the verse that kind of relates to that last discussion we were having. Voters must be educated to defend democracy's aims. Our enemies spread memes in their news feeds to sow division and national shame. But if you want socialized healthcare, you really must be insane. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I listen to All Things Considered. I'd consider anyone's views. I watch Colbert and Maddow. I use irony in everything I do. But when Trump set his sights on Maduro, there was no one more red, white, and blue. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I vote for the Democratic Party. They're strengthening NATO command. I support Bono's benefit concerts and buy whatever's endorsed by his brand. We're gonna make poverty history. I'm on Facebook taking a stand. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. Sure, once I was young and impulsive. I wore every conceivable pin. I fought for a socialist future, which I actually thought we might win. But I've grown older and wiser, and that's why I'm turning you in. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal.
Oh, fantastic, Ben. I have to say, no offense to anybody else, but that is the best rewrite of Love Me Have a Liberal that anybody's ever done. And and it just keeps getting better. That's fantastic. Fantastic. And I love the way you're also keeping really kind of strictly to the original as well as like with especially that last verse. I like it kind of wraps it back up into the things are the same. Ben, tell me about any particular probably we're talking online, but plans in your life or with PMN or anything. I mean, one thing that you're involved with that I'm also tangentially involved with was it April 3rd? We're going to have a commemoration about Ann Feeney. And where is that going to be? Where can people find that? Is that on somewhere?
There's a Facebook event. Actually, I know I posted the Facebook event to the People's Music Network Facebook page.
Cool.
If you look up People's Music Network and you scroll down a little bit, the Ann Feeney Memorial event is there on April 3rd, and we're opening registration very soon. And there's been this whole group of people who knew and loved Ann who got together basically to grieve, to mourn, and then to start talking about how to move forward with an event to commemorate her life. And we're getting videos from all over. I know we're getting one from you, and we have a video editing team that's going to be stitching that together. There's going to be breakout sessions. So the kind of main thing is like people telling their stories and songs about Ann. And that starts at 3 p.m. Eastern time on April 3rd. But then for a little more intimate space, we're actually going to have some facilitated breakout rooms that are going to happen right after that, all on Zoom. So you do need to register, which is going to, again, like I said, open very soon. But get mark yourself going on the Facebook event so you get the notification and everything. You'll be able to get that opportunity to register, and then you'll be able to participate in these discussions. And just Ann Feeney, I mean, I know you've talked about her on your podcast. You wrote that beautiful song about her, David. She was such a stalwart figure of a lot of these communities that we run in, and she was on the picket line. I mean, she was working with unions and bringing this craft of music to those spaces. She's an inspiration to me in just understanding the role of the artist is to help, political, like the political artist who's committed in that way she understood this. I never toured with her, but I did talk to her about this stuff, and she would, she paved a path as to how do you educate the organizations that can benefit from this kind of music, as to how it can be used, right?
Yeah.
And she educated through her example. She was there. She made herself available, and she showed them what couldn't maybe necessarily be easily explained, but that needed to be shown, and then people could understand what the music could
Mm-hmm.
do for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Here, here. Yeah. And I'll see
So
you and hopefully
we
other
all owe
folks
her.
there.
We all owe Ann Feeney, I think, uh, just a tremendous gratitude
Oh,
for
for sure.
having paved that path for us.
For her work and her songs and so much else. Yes.
Yes.
And we'll see folks on Zoom or wherever else on April 3rd for that. And Ben, it's been such a pleasure having you for the hour. Thanks so much for joining me.
David, it's been a career goal of mine to come on your show, so thank you very much.
Oh, it's nice to have reasonable career goals, like really easily attainable ones. One time I was I made the mistake of wearing leather pants to a gig where half the crowd was vegan, or probably more than half the crowd, and and then they basically, to make a long story, not very long story short, they had a little protest, which the goal of which was to get me to take my pants off. Believe it or not, they were successful. The campaign was successful.
That's hilarious, David.
It's good to have reasonable goals. I mean, all you need is a hot tub. If you want to achieve that goal, just provide a hot tub. I'm there.
I
On
love
that
it. I
note,
love it. Thanks,
thank
man.
you, Ben. Take
See ya.
care.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. And thanks everybody for joining in to this discussion with Ben Grosscup, the executive director of People's Music Network. Check out peoplesmusic.org. Hope to see you at the Ann Feeney commemoration that he and other folks are involved with organizing on April 3rd. And I will be back online on Ron Placone's YouTube channel at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Monday to do an interview related to my new album, Rebel Songs, which just came out on Bandcamp a few days ago. And thanks for listening, everybody. And remember, mutual aid will get us through. And trust your neighbors. And and check out my new song. It's been a year. There's an amazing punk rock musician band from Olympia who did a version of the song with me singing, and it's very good. And it's been a year, and this is the anniversary of the COVID becoming a pandemic. So there we go. Marked in words. And take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.